When I was about 24 or so, I worked at a hotel about a half a mile away from my house. My husband and I were dirt poor at the time, so I walked to and from work. I lived in a small town in Louisiana, so things were seemingly safe, typically. I had just gotten off my shift at 3 p.m. and started my journey walking home. I had a backpack with my laptop in it slung over my shoulder. I get about halfway home and this weird man comes walking up on one of the side roads. He looks to be around 35 years old or so, tall and medium build. I keep walking, but I notice he's staring at me while doing so. He begins to yell at me and continues to walk towards me. At this point, I'm on high alert and I quicken my pace. He is coming from one of the side roads in front of me, so at this point he is standing in the way of me and my house. He walks towards me and he yells at me again. I then nod at him and he then asks,
"Where are you going in such a hurry, girl?"
I tell him I'm going home to my husband, which is right around the corner. He reaches out towards me and then he says,
"Why don't you come over to my house and we can talk? Take a break from all that walking."
I tell him no and attempt to walk by him. At this point he reaches out and grabs my arm and then says,
"Did you not hear me? I told you to come back to my house and we can chat."
I'm almost in tears at this point, yelling at him no and to not touch me. Cars are passing by and people are looking, but no one is stopping. I jerk away from him and slap him in the face with my laptop bag. That stunned him long enough for me to run away. Along the way, he was yelling at me saying how I was so ungrateful and that he just wanted to chat. I got home and broke down and I just totally lost it. I passed by that guy's house so many times after that experience, and I've always felt such an intense amount of fear. So to the creepy man who tried to get me to go into his house and talk with him, if you happen to see me again when I'm walking home, please stay away from me. My middle school was walking distance from my house, 2 to 3 blocks at most. School ended at around 3 p.m. and my mom didn't get home until about 4 p.m., so it just made sense for me to walk home every day. One day I was on my way home after class as usual. This was in 6th grade, so I was either 10 or 11 years old at the time. In any case, it was a nice normal day for most of the walk. I was most of the way down my block, only 4 or 5 houses away from my own, when a green pickup truck had then pulled up in the street near me. The truck was facing the opposite direction. A man rolled down his window and called for my attention in a friendly manner.
"Hey there, how's it going?"
I was a little confused, but I did say hi back to him. I stopped where I was, but I didn't get closer to the truck. He continued,
"Hey, I'm trying to find my dog. Have you seen him?"
"No, I haven't," I replied.
"Oh darn. Well hey, I have a picture of him. Can I show it to you? Maybe you can keep an eye out for him for me."
I wasn't the brightest kid, but man, I must have had some wit in me. I don't remember where, but I had definitely heard this story before that day from some other kid. I knew this was a trick. "No, that's okay, sorry, I have to go." He responded one more time.
"Oh, are you sure? It'd really help me out if you went with me."
"No thank you, like I said, I'm really busy and I gotta get going." I then walked home, not totally freaked out, but definitely knowing that something was weird. I walked inside, locked the doors, and then called my mom at work. She was already on her way home from work. She got home and I told her what happened. I'll be honest, I don't really remember what happened from there. All I know is from that day on, I would always walk to the library after I got out of school instead of walking home until my mom could pick me up. Looking back on it, I think at the time that I'd heard so much about kidnappings on television, in school, assemblies, etc., that my reaction probably amounted to, "Oh, okay, this is one of those things that always happens to people. Don't go talk to the man, just go home. That's what they told me to do." That's probably why I don't remember too much of the details after what happened. It was weird. It wasn't until a few years ago that I put everything together, that my entire innocence or even my life could have ended right then and there on that day. I think I deserve a freaking A+ for my stranger danger awareness on this one. In any case, pickup truck man with the missing dog. I really hope we never meet again. I'm a 28-year-old male, and 7 nights ago at around 10:30 p.m., my life changed. I was walking home from work in downtown Vancouver, British Columbia, when I was randomly punched and kicked by someone walking past me. Now, I had never seen this person before. I said nothing to this person, and I wasn't in their way. In fact, I made a point of moving out of his way as he was walking fairly close to me. As I walked past him, he swung his hand out, punched me in the forehead, and went in for a punch. Being a fairly big guy with defensive training, I was able to protect myself from the second punch. After working a very long and hard shift, I didn't want to get into a fight, so I tried to flee. That's when I saw some people walking in my way and watching what was going on. I screamed for them to call the police, and that's when he started to kick me in the back. The couple didn't call, so I reached for my phone and pushed the power button about 5 times to activate SOS mode. The operator picked up, and when the assailant heard I was on the phone, he bounced. The police came, took my statements, and in the process, another unit arrested the guy. I've had a pretty bad headache, and I'm all bruised up. But the worst part is the mental anguish that I suffer walking in public, and even more so when I have to walk alone at night. The walk is down a very populated main road, but that doesn't ease the pain and stress. I always make sure to watch every single person now, check over my shoulders every couple of seconds, and practically jog all the way home. I feel like an idiot for even feeling this way. As a male raised in a household of competitive fighters, I was always told to never feel weak, but all I wanted to do when I got home that night was just sit in the shower and break down. Anyways, that's my story. Thank you for taking the time to listen to it and letting me vent. And for anyone else that walks home at night, please be careful. I moved to Chicago a couple of years ago from a different city, and I always felt like I had the smarts and awareness to stay out of trouble. Of course, the best laid plans so often go awry, especially with the help of alcohol. I met up with my boss at a bar that was close from my apartment, and we decided to part ways shortly after midnight. I was always pretty adamant about taking a car home or not walking alone, but after a couple of beers and a few shots, I figured that I could handle a 5-minute stroll. I mean, what's the worst that can really happen? I waved him off when he offered to escort me, watched as he got into his own car, then started home. Soon after I turned off the main road onto my own street, my apartment was roughly about 3 blocks away. As I approached the first cross street, a van pulled up and let me pass in front of it. I heard the back door quickly slide open and then heard someone's feet hit the pavement. I took out my pocket knife, opened it, and kept it tucked slightly in my sleeve. A quick glance let me know that a man was following behind me, head down and hood up, with the gap between us getting closer and closer. While fighting off a heart attack and trying to decide whether I would fight back or not, I heard a quiet jingling coming from the next cross street. A man appeared across from around the corner walking 2 fairly large dogs. Without even thinking, I ran across the street to meet him. In retrospect, I must have scared the crap out of him. I don't really know if he saw my knife, but suddenly some girl came running over to him and then hissing, "I know I don't know you, but can you please help me?" He looked at me like I was crazy and started trying to walk away, so I repeated it slower this time. "Hey, I'm really sorry, but I don't know the guy behind me." I looked back and then watched my follower jump a fence, disappearing into a backyard. "Now, can I please walk with you?" Once he figured out what I was saying, he was completely understanding. Both him and his dogs were both super nice, and he ended up walking me all the way back to my apartment. Unfortunately, I never got his name, but if you own a dog named Pumpkin, thank you. I've been very lucky to have no further incidents, and I'm really glad that I never found out what my follower was up to. I'm a female, and at the time I was 21. I was visiting my old hometown, and me and some old friends had decided to go to a local club. For some reason that I can't remember, I left earlier than the others and decided to walk home since it was only a couple of kilometers and taxis are very expensive there. It was winter and very quiet, no one to be seen anywhere. I walked very fast because it was cold and I wanted to get home very quickly. Then I saw a man walking in an opposite direction. But at first I didn't think much of it and just assumed he was just some guy walking home from a bar or a party. Kinda like me. He then greeted me, but I didn't know him, so I just kept walking without answering. To my horror, he then turned around and started following me. I dialed the emergency number to my phone and put it in my pocket so that I could make a secret call if he did anything sketchy. He then ran up to me and started asking me questions like why I was walking alone, what my name was, did I live here, etc. I didn't really answer any of his questions and told him I didn't need company. He was starting to really creep me out, and then he told me he was going to walk me home so that nobody does anything to me. I wanted to scream at him that you're the only person here that could do anything. Screw off. I don't really know if he actually had some kind of superhero complex and just wanted to save damsels in distress, but I wasn't in any distress until he came along, and he was drunk. And if you don't mind me saying, this guy looked a bit crazy. He then proceeded to grab my hand like we were some romantically involved couple. I didn't dare to resist, and my home was very close, so I didn't want to anger him. When I saw my house, I told him that I was fine now and that he could let me go. He asked if I was home alone, and I told him that both my sister and her boyfriend were there. That seemed to put him off, and then he hugged me, told me goodbye, and finally left. I then ran inside my house as quick as I could. I never saw him again, but later a friend of mine who lived close to my home told me of a similar experience. Maybe a year after that, my mom told me she had been walking home one late night and some creep had followed her too, saying the exact same things that the guy said to me, and wanted to make sure that nothing bad happened. Pretty much the same stuff he was saying to me. So, to that really weird guy with the superhero complex, if you see any women walking alone at night, please leave them alone. It was back in the summer of 1974, and I was 16 years old at the time. I had just attended a concert in the city with my friends Dave and John. The three of us were catching a train home. We had got off at our stop, and we began walking home down the main road, chatting about the concert and still buzzing from the cool vibes. It was around 12 a.m. and we were crossing at a main intersection. There wasn't much traffic around this time of night. And as we crossed the road, we suddenly noticed a beat-up brown-colored station wagon stop in the middle of the intersection right near us. His window was down and the driver was around 25 to 30 years old, and although he looked a little dodgy, we just assumed he was going to ask for directions, and so we just stood there waiting to see what this guy wanted, completely unaware of the sheer terror that was about to follow. In that very moment, the guy pulled out a pistol from his lap, and what he uttered next still gives me shivers to this day. He said in a calm tone,
"Who wants it first?"
We just froze in absolute shock and terror, and it took a few seconds for all the reality of this to finally sink in. We didn't even have time to exchange a look, and we all hightailed it across the intersection. As our footsteps thundered across the road, the sound of gunshots filled the air as we ran for those bushes. I was absolutely terrified, waiting for that bullet to hit me or one of my friends in the back. As we ran further into the park and mustered up the courage to look back, we could no longer see the car and breathed a sigh of relief. We all just stood there trying to get our breath back. Luckily, we all knew the area pretty well, and we decided to continue along the old gravel road that we knew would take us back towards our homes. As we walked down the path, our conversation was pretty minimal, as we were too preoccupied of the thoughts of what had just happened and how lucky we were. However, that feeling of relief didn't last very long. As we got near the end of the gravel road, I could make out a car at the very end, and I started to wonder to myself, could that be the guy? We kept walking, but then just like out of a scary movie, the car flicked on its headlights and started revving its engine, and under the dim lights of the street, my heart began to sink as I then realized it was the brown station wagon. We knew he could see us. He was waiting for us, taunting us. He must know these streets well and where each of the different roads would lead. Well, we didn't waste another second. We took off once again and jumped the fence of a neighboring house. We didn't stop, we just kept running and jumping all of the fences. I glanced toward the road many times and I would see his car screaming past. Each time we made it to a main road, We would see his car appear again and once again speed towards us, and we dove over fences and tried to find another way. This happened about 2 or 3 more times after that. Around 1:30 a.m., we got down the end of another side road, and we couldn't see at the time, but the fence we jumped was covered in barbed wire, and it tore our clothes as we slid down. I let out a few groans as it grazed my arm. We were now in some kind of paddock-type area, and we could faintly hear the screeches of his tires racing around trying to find us. We just stood there crouching in the dark, breathing heavily, standing in cow manner, but we didn't care. We probably crouched for about 15 minutes or so, just waiting in the dark. Figuring by now he must be gone, we made our way back onto the main road. We kept our eyes peeled and kept glancing over our shoulders, and as the headlights appeared in the distance on many occasions, we each stopped breathing for a second, wondering in anticipation whether or not it was going to be the brown station wagon. We didn't see him again after that, and around 3 a.m. we walked my friend John home. Dave came back to mind for a bit so we could talk more calmly about our experience. Dave went home later that night. What was only meant to be a 20-minute walk home turned into a 2-hour terror trip that I will never forget. What was even more scary was a week or so later, I heard on the news that an elderly lady was shot by a random stranger one late night not too far from where this happened. Whether it was the same guy or not, I'll never know. All I really know is that my friends and I were incredibly lucky to escape that night. I live in a relatively safe area in Scotland, though I've had several really odd and scary experiences since I moved here about 4 years ago. I'm a short 29-year-old woman and I work in a pub, so I often get out of work quite late. I never wear my headphones when headed home at night, so this particular night was no different than usual. Alarm set, doors locked and checked, then said goodbye to my colleague and then went our separate ways to get home. I usually cross a grocery store car park to get home, and that night something struck me as odd. There were a couple of cars parked there, which is normal, but something just felt off this time. I looked over my shoulder and I clocked a guy in a hat walking a distance behind me. This wasn't weird, but I decided to keep an eye on him nonetheless. I exited the car park to the main road that I lived off of, but still had a good mile or so to go before I finally reached my flat. I checked over my shoulder again, and sure enough, the guy was walking in the same direction as me. The distance between us was starting to close, so I decided to cross the road. Looking over my shoulder, I was able to not only look for traffic coming, but I was also able to keep an eye on him. I crossed the road and didn't bother to look back for another few minutes, assuming he had stayed on the other side. But I began to hear footsteps approaching. I glanced over my shoulder and saw this guy was about 20 feet behind me. I had a soft drink in a glass bottle in my bag, and figuring I was overacting but better safe than sorry, I stuck my hand into my bag and gripped the bottle. Another 45 seconds and this guy was close enough to touch me, but he slows to my pace and then says,
"Hello there, how are you?"
I ignored him and I don't respond. I long ago gave up on pretenses of being polite if I feel uncomfortable. If I'm feeling uncomfortable, I really don't care about a stranger's feelings. But he persists in talking to me.
"Hi there, are you going to work today?"
No. I was being short with him.
"Are you going home?"
Yes, I said coldly. "Do you live in this direction?" I just looked at him, and he tried again.
"Do you live off this road? Where do you live? Do you live close by?"
I don't respond to him and I slowed my pace, letting him walk on. I was still gripping the glass bottle, ready to hit him with it should he try anything. He tried to slow down so that I would catch up with him, but I slowed down so much that I was barely walking. He was maybe 300 yards away at this point and simply stopped and turned around, watching me and waiting for me to catch up with him. I reached into my pocket with my free hand and tried to get my phone. Of course, my phone was dead. I figured it would last the walk home, but the dodgy battery had other ideas. Surprisingly though, I wasn't really afraid. He had started walking again, but again, still quite slowly. He looked over his shoulder again after another minute, and I seized the opportunity. There was a path to a block of flats that was obscured by tall hedges, so I leaped behind them. I waited for nearly 10 minutes, never letting go of that bottle the whole time. I peeked around the hedges to make sure he was there. I peeked behind bins and bus stops to make sure he wasn't hiding, but as far as I could tell, I had lost him. Maybe he didn't mean anything by this, but if you suspect a woman is afraid of you and she's walking alone at night, don't speak to her. It won't help. And especially don't ask her where she lives repeatedly. I wasn't drunk. I didn't appear to be drunk or need any help. I was just walking home like I usually would. I am, however, inclined to believe that he had bad intentions. I would rather be too cautious than not. So did that creepy dude who seemed to be following me home that night screw off? Hey everyone, I hope you enjoyed today's video. And if you have your own personal scary story, be sure to submit that to my subreddit at reddit.com/r/southerncannibal or to my email at southerncannibal@gmail.com. I'm always looking for new stories. And before we bring this video to a close, I just want to shout out all of my $5 or more patrons, as well as my $3 or more patrons featured on screen. Shout out to Babe Lincoln, Beth A, Kate E, Katrina T, Celeste S, Ellie S, Emily W, Heather B, Howard R, Jazzy G, Jonathan C, Joseph F, Lori J, Matthew B, Michael G, Steph L, Tammy S, Terry H, 2Eki for you, and Victor R. Thank all of you so much for supporting me on Patreon. I really appreciate it more than you know. And if any of you would like to join these awesome people and also become a patron, head over to my Patreon at patreon.com/southerncannibal. Thank you everyone, and have a good one. And remember to always